Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know y'all with me, let's get it, baby, Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know you with me, let's get it, baby.
Welcome back to another edition of the Rockin' Royal Soccer Show, postseason edition, and not just the conference tournament postseason, but the NCAA tournament is upon us. And BYU is back in the field for the 7th consecutive season, 25th time all time in Jen Rockwood's 30 years as a coach. We're here to break it all down for you from KSL.com. I'm Sean Walker, your host, as always, joined by my inestimable colleague, Carla Swensen-Haslam. You know her from ESPN Plus. I know her as a former BYU women's soccer star. She also occasionally bails me out on legal troubles, but we don't need to go into that today. We're going to go into soccer. Carla, how are you doing, and are you half as good as Jen Rockwood's program after being named a number 7 seed in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I did not see that one coming. But if you're a Cougar fan, like, hooray. Hooray, because wow, talk about a team that we didn't even know if they would make the tournament 2 months ago, and here they are actually now preparing to host in the first round of the NCAA, which says so much about them to be high seeded, to be able to be at home, and to be able to be playing against what is a very talented Santa Clara team. That means that the NCAA committee believed that BYU is more deserving of a home field advantage than that of Santa Clara, who has, historically just been a powerhouse in the NCAA. So to answer your question, I don't know if I'm doing as well as this BYU squad, but wow, so excited for more soccer. And you're right. Here we are, still talking in the postseason.
Yeah, more soccer in the field, more soccer at Southfield. We should take this opportunity real quick to give a shout out to our neighbors up the road at Utah State as well, hosting an NCAA tournament game for the first time. Number 25 Utah State, they're an 8 seed. They'll host Big Ten foe Washington this Friday in the first round at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Chuck and Gloria Belfield and Logan. The Aggies put together an incredible season, 18-1-4. I don't want to totally discount them. This is a BYU podcast. We're going to focus on BYU. But shout out to the Aggies, really putting in a lot of work. First time ever that NCAA tournament games will be hosted on the same day in Provo and Logan, almost simultaneously, 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock this Friday afternoon. It really was a great season in college soccer across the Wasatch. So just wanted to give a quick shout out, a quick plug to the Aggies right there. What Manny Martins has done with that program, I think is awesome. As has what Jen Rockwood's been doing for the past 30 years with this program, has been awesome. 7 straight seasons in the NCAA tournament, 25 of the last 30 years. They're coming off of 2 College Cup semifinals in the past 3 years. And this was a team, Carla, that you touched on it a little bit, that we didn't know what we had at the start of the year. They're replacing 9 of 11 starters, roughly-ish, 10 of 11 for parts of the year. So just one or two returning starters, Ali Fryer and Lynette Ernez in goal. That's a nice group to build around, but there was a core of this team that left a lot of question marks. And quite frankly, at the start of the year, a lot to be desired. But they rallied from a tough start to the year, just 1 win in their first 5 matches. You knew that non-conference schedule was going to be rough, and it paid off in the end when BYU finishes 9-6-5, 6-2-3 in Big 12 play. They end up with the number 4 seed in the conference tournament, blast Oklahoma State in that first round, put in a good game, I think, against number 1 seeded TCU in the semifinals before TCU bows out to an incredible Cinderella run by Kansas in the Big 12 tournament. BYU finishes with the number 26 RPI mark in the nation, and I can't help but think that is the reason why there will be soccer on Southfield this Friday, is because of that number 26 RPI, and in particular because of that brutally tough non-conference strength of schedule that Jen Rockwood always plays all of the time, and once again, it's paying massive, massive dividends for this Cougar team.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. This was a team that I think was, and I'm speaking of BYU, was a team that was just hanging out in that high 40s, low 50s RPI range all season, which is good, It means that they probably get an at-large bid for the tournament. But then having such a stellar last two games in conference play boosts them all the way up into the mid 20s, which is insane. Like if you have mid 20, RPI or lower, like you should be hosting. And so you're right. It's one of those things that came down to the very wire. This was very much a marathon, not a sprint for BYU, because it was a slow progression to get to that 20th RPI spot. And then you're right, to be able to just crush OSU in the conference tournament, I think really put a stamp on things for the NCAA. I think the NCAA started paying really good attention to this BYU team, and then be able to have such a close game to TCU. I know they lost in the semifinals against TCU last week, as you briefly mentioned, but to be able to have such a close game, to be able to actually score first, I think showed the NCAA, no, this is a team that, even though it's a building year, a rebuilding year, is still very much deserving of having a spot in the tournament, and even so much, that they get to host. And RPI aside, it helps that BYU has quite a legacy. I think it helps just to be BYU. And that's not to discredit any of the things that they've done this season in any way. But I think it helps to be a BYU. I think it helps to be a big soccer school when it comes to the NCAA, because they love to have legacied programs continue to come every year. They love to have legacied programs come to the tournament because it means that they get more viewership. It means they make more money. And so I think it helps to be the Cougars when it comes to seeding in the NCAA.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. BYU soccer is currently one of the big fish in college soccer. They've proven that, again, 25 of the last 30 NCAA tournaments. Just just a remarkable number in so many ways, and they've done it in every league they've been in. Like, this isn't just a big time Big 12 program. We'll get to that. I'll get to that in a quick second, but they've shown what they can do in the old WAC for a couple of years. They showed what they could do through the Mountain West. They showed what they could do in the WCC, which is a very good soccer conference as well. Now they're showing what they can do in back-to-back years in the Big 12. The Big 12, Carla, put in 7 NCAA tournament teams this year. 7 NCAA tournament teams. Most of them, over 50% of them, will be hosting first-round games. You've got, obviously, BYU and Santa Clara this Friday, but Texas Tech's going to be an 8 seed hosting LSU in the first round this weekend. TCU will host Stephen F. Austin. They're a 5 seed. Kansas, I mentioned, the Big 12 champion. They're actually going on the road to A10 champs and 8-seeded St. Louis. BYU knows a thing or two about the Billikens right there. That should be a really fun matchup. Oklahoma State is also in. They're playing at Arkansas in the first round. West Virginia will make its 23 all-time appearance in the NCAA tournament when they kick off this weekend at Kentucky. And then Colorado will also play at number 7, Georgia. So 7 NCAA tournament teams from the Big 12. Again, BYU's really tough RPI that was built up through this just brutally tough non-conference stretch, I think was also rewarded with a Big 12 program that, it had a couple of moments, a couple of teams that you may want to call minnows in some way, and BYU just kind of had to take care of business against those teams. But this conference was also very good this year, and I can't help but think that benefit teams like BYU as well, having such a deep Big 12.
I agree completely. There were some huge games that I think throughout the season, again, we talk about having the NCAA committees like pay attention. And I think there were some big games throughout the season that BYU was able to bank on. And then you mentioned the difficult non-conference play schedule and how that ties into it. And I do think there is an art to scheduling your non-conference games, and I think BYU does a really good job of scheduling really tough games and then scheduling some in-state games. And I think there is an art to it, and I think they've done a very good job of figuring out what works for them and pays off at the end of the season.
Yeah, and it's paying off right now when BYU will host 6 p.m. this Friday on Southfield. Tickets will go on sale to the general public, by the way, Wednesday, if you're interested. BYU will host a very familiar opponent in Santa Clara. They're the WCC champs, making the NCAA tournament for the 34th time in program history. That's the third most in the athletic department. This is a very good program after clinching their 14th West Coast Conference title. BYU and Santa Clara are no strangers on that end. They were spend a decade in the same conference. Obviously, that's first and foremost. And this will be over a dozen meetings all time between Jen Rockwood and head coach Jerry Smith. Again, it's two teams that know each other really well. And Carla, you actually played in the WCC under Coach Rockwood and for BYU. What do you remember about this series? Like, is it too much to call this a rivalry? Because I do feel like in a very sports-specific niche, like I don't want to say this is like an all-time athletic department rivalry or anything, but in a very sports-specific niche, it always felt like BYU and Santa Clara soccer really got up for each other when they played in the regular season, or even a couple of times that they played in postseason play as well.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. No doubt at all. You're right. I think it's specific to soccer, but in soccer, Santa Clara was the game that we circled on our calendars because we knew that was going to be the toughest one. We knew that they were always going to have such a hard matchup. It was always so hard to score on Santa Clara. I remember that was like the game that we knew would determine the conference. It usually was. Was it going to be BYU or Santa Clara winning the conference? And they're just a tough team, just so athletic. Coach Jerry does such a good job of preparing his team for BYU. It's just a tough matchup. I remember playing in Santa Clara was always so hard. Again, just so difficult to score. Their defenses were always so solid. And again, Coach Shearer just does a good job of recruiting very athletic players. It's a team that has won national championships in the past. And so they bring in huge recruits because they're such a big soccer name. They've had players that have gone on to play for the U.S. women's national team. I could go on and on. The point I'm making is that was a huge game in the women's soccer world and usually determined who won the WCC conference, who would get an at-home bid for the NCAA tournament. There have been plenty of times where BYU or Santa Clara would beat the other, and then in the tournament play would then get a revenge game. So yes, I agree. This is a huge game for BYU. It's a little unfortunate that they have to play in the very first round. I would see this as maybe a second or third round game. But alas, I'm not on the committee that makes those decisions. Utah State, because they came in as such a high seed, I think the NCAA was forced to go to Santa Clara rather than do a geographical game. I think that would have been really fun to be able to see a Utah State BYU, matchup again. But anyway, Utah State did so well that I think the NCAA committee said, no, we have to go out of state. And so this will be a really tough one for BYU. Granted, I don't think Santa Clara had the same season as BYU as far as competitiveness goes, but this will definitely be a rivalry game. This will definitely be a competitive game. And for fans that are watching, like this will be a nail biter.
4-3-7 in their decade that they shared together in the West Coast Conference. The WCC, by the way, which has been a multiple bid league for 33 straight years. That streak continues this year. Santa Clara and Pepperdine also making the big dance in the NCAA tournament. So a very good soccer conference. And it was even better when BYU was in that league. It really was. I mean, the top of the league was second to very few, if not second to none. In the WCC, it's an area, I think I said it around the time that BYU joined the Big 12. They weren't necessarily making a massive jump up going from the WCC to the Big 12 because there were so many very good programs in that West Coast Conference. It was probably a little bit closer to a lateral move than a lot of the other sports, but obviously across the athletic department, you take that Big 12 move overall. One of the reasons why I was so high on WCC soccer was because of Santa Clara. Did you know, Carla, BYU and Santa Clara are actually currently on a tie streak. Back-to-back, the last two games in this series both ended in 0-0 draws, both in Provo, both 0-0, one in 2021, the other in 2022 as well. BYU's unbeaten in 4 of the last 5 with 2 other wins, one home, one away. Santa Clara hasn't won since a 2-1 win at home back in 2021 in this series. So these games are, you're absolutely right. These games are always tight, almost always high scoring. I'm looking right now at a 4-3 win right now. That was the exception and very much not the norm just under a decade ago. These two teams in some ways don't like each other. There's always a little bit of that with a rivalry, right? But I also think there's a ton of respect among these programs as well, in particular with Coach Rockwood and Coach Jerry. You could feel like I always like watching how coaches interact when they come to Southfield, how Jen will approach a coach or a coach will approach her, how long they'll spend just kind of talking at midfield while watching both teams warm up and that sort of thing. And there was always very cordial interactions between these two coaches. Like they spent a lot of time in sort of that pregame, just talking, chit-chatting. I don't know what they were talking about. I was never close enough to the conversation, never needed to be. But it always felt like there was a very strong amount of respect between these two programs. Did that translate into the locker room at all?
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. And I know in preparation for these broadcasts that I would do, we would speak with Coach Rockwood and Coach Jerry, and they always said that. They always said that, the other was someone who they highly respected and admired and learned a lot from. I know, Coach Rockwood has spoken in the past about watching Coach Jerry, when he worked with the U.S. women's national teams, and how he would prepare his teams for Olympics and World Cups, and the youth teams, how he would prepare them, to go on and play for the senior team, and how she learned a lot from that about, how do you prepare a team for big games and for big competitions. And he's one of the big names in women's soccer as well. I mean, when he retires, there will be, a big mini documentary made of him, just as there was, for Anson Dorrance, who retired earlier this year. I mean, he's one of those coaches that will also be part of that coaching Hall of Fame one day because of the success that he's had and his tenure that he's had. And so I definitely agree that there's that respect there. I think there's a mutual respect that comes from just coaching for so long. You think if anybody's going to be coaching for decades, they naturally garner respect because of just simply their experience. And so I think that also exists on both sides for Coach Rockwood in her 30th season. And then also Jerry, I'm not sure how many years he's been with Santa Clara, but a long time, decades and decades. I mean, I don't remember who was the coach prior to him. And so the point I'm making is I do think that respect is there simply because these are two coaches that have been doing it for a long time. And you're starting to see that more and more as women's soccer grows. First at BYU, their first, NCAA run came, or I should say Division I in the NCAA came in 1995. And you have a lot of coaches who have also been coaching since then as well. And so, yeah, I think this is, like I said, I think it's going to be very much a legacy game. I think it'll be such a good one because of the history between these two teams and because fans will recognize these two teams.
100%. Santa Clara 12-3-4 overall, 6-1-3 in WCC play. Like we mentioned, champions of the West Coast Conference. They will open the NCAA tournament this Friday. It's a home game, Cougar fans, so you don't have much excuse not to sell out Southfield. 6 p.m. Mountain Time this Friday at Southfield. If you don't get tickets, you can catch the action on ESPN Plus. As always, there will be a broadcast there. But I don't think any of us expected a home game at this point. Except maybe in the last month of the season. Shout out to BYU Women's Soccer for earning that number 7 seed and hosting a game in what was categorically, I think, a rebuild year. Really pretty remarkable stuff for this program. And honestly, I think one of the better coaching jobs of Jen Rockwood's career. And I don't say that lightly. She really is. I mean, she's up there on the short list of the GOAT of BYU Athletics now. 9 NCAA Sweet 16 appearances, 5 Elite Eights, and a couple of College Cup semifinals, in addition to that national championship game appearance back in 2021. She's back in the NCAA tournament again. This team is back in the NCAA tournament again. We will be there the whole way, Carla, no matter how quick or how short it is. We'll be there on Friday. Get you all the hashtag content that you deserve because the season continues once again for at least one more game. It's one and done, and will be at least one more until we're done on this podcast. So on that note, thank you guys for joining us for this whole season. Thanks for joining us for the postseason. I'm Sean Walker from KSL.com on behalf of my inestimable colleague, Carla Swensen-Haslam, saying so long and see you on the pitch.
We getting jiggy with that boy Cosmo. Hey. We granting kids wishes like that boy Cosmo. I got you. They steady hating on us, but we who they watch though. The Pac-12 mad, but we still on top, bro. Jaron Holder, Cody Epps, that's a cool connect. Yeah, my team is kinda old, but it's cool, we vets.
I'm hitting too hard. Ow, I hurt my neck.
Hey, Leak, you good,